Last month, I crumpled onto my kitchen tiles and dialed my son for help. He answered with, "It's Sarah's birthday, Mom. Can we talk next week?" That was the instant I stopped feeling like his mother. I could have let it go, but I chose not to. Around noon, a weird tightness gripped my chest and wouldn't ease up. I kept on folding laundry, socks, worn-out towels, and his old t-shirts he never bothered to pick up. I smoothed their edges, just like when he was a boy, even though it felt silly. Old habits cling tight, even when love starts to fray. By sunset, that tightness in my chest grew heavier, oppressive. I figured it was just my usual exhaustion. I kept telling myself I was okay. At 62, you get used to putting yourself last. But I wasn't okay. My hand kept drifting to my chest, again and again. I didn't rest, though. I stirred up a pot of chicken and dill soup, his favorite, not Sarah's. She once called it old-fashioned, but I made it anyway. I'd planned to set aside a bowl for him. He'd promised to swing by last month, then the month before. That bowl had been waiting for ages. Then, the bowl I'd just filled slipped from my hands. Soup splattered everywhere, the bowl broke into pieces, and I collapsed right along with it. The cold tile pressed against my cheek. My arm wouldn't move. My legs felt useless. But I could still reach. My fingers grazed my phone, and I tapped James's name. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice too cheerful, almost forced. I heard clinking plates, laughter, music in the background, a party. "James," I whispered, struggling, "something's not right." His tone shifted, but only a fraction. "Mom, we just sat down for Sarah's birthday. Can I call you next week?" Those words cut sharper than any knife. I steadied my voice. "I think I need an ambulance." A pause, then irritation in his voice. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes," I said, barely audible. Then he said, "Just call 911. That's what they're there for." And he hung up. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't say he'd come. He didn't ask if I was alone or if I needed him. He asked nothing. I lay there, swallowed by silence. The ambulance arrived. I don't know if I dialed or if the phone redialed itself, but someone came. They hoisted me onto a stretcher, and the world blurred into bright hospital lights. Nurses moved quickly, machines hummed, and they fired questions at me: birth date, allergies, medications. I answered alone. No one followed me in, no son, no visitor, no family. Later, a nurse gently adjusted my gown and asked, "Is anyone coming for you?" I shook my head. I kept replaying how he said Sarah's birthday, like it was untouchable, like that dinner, that cake, mattered more than the woman who raised him. His dismissal felt so smooth, so practiced, not even angry, just effortless. He didn't ask which hospital I was in. He didn't ask what I needed. He didn't say, "Hold on, Mom." He didn't say anything that showed he cared. Just, "Call 911. I used to skip work to sit by his side when he had a fever. I'd drive his forgotten homework to school. When he crashed his first car, I took the blame for letting him borrow it. When his rent was overdue, I covered it. When his fridge was empty, I filled it. I was always there. I thought back to when he called me, sobbing, because Sarah threatened to leave him. I stayed on the line, soothing his fears, listening. I didn't say, "I'm busy." But he said, "I'll try next week." I wanted to scream, but the hospital machine stayed quiet, and so did I. My anger wasn't loud, it simmered, slow and cold, sinking deep. I remembered every birthday I planned for him, every Halloween costume I stitched, every meal I skipped so he'd have what he needed. I celebrated his victories and shielded him from his failures. When Sarah lost her job, I paid their bills. When they argued, I comforted them both. I never got a thank you. I didn't expect one. I just hoped one day he'd show up when it mattered. And when it did, he didn't. He chose a dinner over me. He chose laughter over my pain. He chose a cake over my crisis. Resentment doesn't shout, it grows quietly, tallying every word. Mom, it's Sarah's birthday. But I was your mother long before she knew you. We literally just sat down. And I was lying on the floor. Can I call you next week? No, James, next week won't help me now. Are you serious? Do you think I'd call you if I wasn't? Call 911. That's what they're for. And what are you for, James? He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't even say he'd check in later. He just left me there, like an inconvenience, a disruption. Maybe that's all I'd ever been to him. Not a mother, not a person, just the one who fixed things, cleaned up his messes, kept everything together. I lay awake all night in that hospital bed, staring at the hallway, watching the clock. He didn't show up. Not even a text. He left me there like I was nobody. And that's when I realized I'd been nobody to him for a long time. I didn't cry or break down. I just stared at the door he'd never walk through. And I decided if he ever did come, I wouldn't open it. Not anymore. He chose that dinner, that cake, her over me. For 32 years, I chose him every single day. But no more. I chose myself. They say the second night in the hospital is harder. The adrenaline fades, and the silence settles in. My heart was stable, but my soul wasn't. Lying in that bed, with machines humming softly, all I could think about was that call. Not the doctor's diagnosis, not the nurse's gentle voice, just his words. The way he said, "Can I call you next week?" rang louder than the heart monitor's beeps. It looped in my head, a cruel echo tightening my chest. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but I couldn't, not because I was hurt, but because I felt erased. When I opened my eyes, the room was still dim. No chair pulled close by a visitor. No flowers on the table. No familiar face saying, "I'm here for you." Just me, alone in that sterile, air-conditioned void. I pressed the nurse call button, not because I needed help, but just to know someone would answer when I reached out. She came in, her shoes soft on the linoleum. "You okay, sweetheart? Need anything?" I almost asked her to stay. Instead, I mumbled, "I'm fine, thanks," and turned away, because even her kindness stung, reminding me of the care I craved from the one person who wouldn't give it. I stared at the whiteboard across from my bed. My name scrawled in marker, the date, a little smiley face someone drew to brighten the room. I stared until it blurred. "I'll try next week." I used to think he meant well. Even when he forgot my birthdays, went months without calling, or showed up late and left early, I'd tell myself he cared deep down. But there's a point where meaning well stops meaning anything at all. In that moment, I counted every slight. Every visit he skipped. Every time he said, "We're just so busy." Every call he made only when he needed something. The time he didn't tell me they'd moved, I heard it from a neighbor. The time he borrowed money and never brought it up again. The time Sarah rolled her eyes at my casserole, saying, "We don't eat stuff like that." And he didn't stand up for me. He just gave an awkward chuckle, soft and guilty, but still a laugh. The time he asked me to watch their dog for their vacation, and when I mentioned my doctor's appointment, he said, "Can't you just reschedule? It's only a checkup." All of it, small slights, forgotten moments, and now this one gaping wound that tore everything open. When dawn finally broke, the hospital room didn't feel any warmer. It just looked raw, stripped bare, unapologetic. The doctor walked in, clutching a clipboard. "You experienced atrial fibrillation," he said. "It's treatable, but you'll need rest and less stress in your life." I nearly chuckled. Rest? Less stress? For decades, I'd been hauling around burdens that weren't even mine: James's failed business ideas, Sarah's endless grumbling, bills I had no business paying, and duties I took on because saying no felt impossible. He left with a gentle smile, unaware his words only deepened my quiet fears. This might not be the last time my heart falters. And if it happens again, I won't be reaching out to James. A volunteer rolled in a cart stacked with books and newspapers. I asked for a pen and some paper instead, not to pour out my feelings, but to map out my next steps. I wasn't about to let this fade into just another letdown. I needed it to matter, to mean something. I scribbled my first note: contact the lawyer. Next, check my accounts and stop any automatic payments. And third, ask the nurses about visitor restrictions. I didn't want James showing up now, not with belated flowers or guilt-ridden apologies. Not after the worst was over. His absence had shouted louder than any words he could muster now. I pictured him waltzing in, late as always. He'd probably say, "Mom, why didn't you tell me it was bad?" As if I hadn't tried. He'd mutter, "We were right in the middle of dinner." As if birthdays can't wait, as if hearts don't stop. He'd claim, "You know I love you." As if love looks like turning away. He'd wrap me in a hug, too tight, too late, and I'd be expected to act thankful. No, I was done with that. So I waved the nurse over and asked her to add a note to my chart. "No visitors unless I approve them," I said firmly. "Especially not my son." She didn't blink, just nodded. "Got it," she said. I wanted to explain, to spill the whole story, but how do you sum up a lifetime of excuses? I just nodded back. After she left, I gazed out the window. The parking lot below gleamed in the morning sun. People came and went, lives kept moving. But inside me, something had stilled, not shattered, just paused. I stopped trying to figure him out. I stopped making excuses for him. With every passing moment, a strange clarity washed over me, like a fog I'd lived in for years was finally clearing. James had shown me exactly who he was, not in one dramatic moment, but in countless small ones. Moments I'd ignored, laughed off, or buried, but now they stood sharp and clear. And they stung. Every single one. Like when he asked why I didn't downsize my house. "It's too big for just you." Translation: sell it so I don't have to deal with it. Or when he sighed and rolled his eyes when I asked for help moving a couch. "Just hire someone, Mom." Translation: you're too much trouble. Or when Sarah floated the idea of a retirement home, and he didn't shut it down. Translation: they've already discussed my future without me. Every memory now glowed like warning signs I'd walked right past. By afternoon, I'd made my decision. No yelling, no long explanations, just action, quiet and firm. No theatrics, just change. I called my lawyer, and he picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Thompson, how are you holding up?" he asked. "Better than before," I replied. He didn't pry about my tone, just asked what I needed. "I want to update my will," I told him. "Remove a name and stop the trust payments, effective immediately." He paused, maybe expecting me to explain, but I didn't, and he didn't push. The call wrapped up fast, with paperwork promised by week's end. I stared at my phone after hanging up. James's name glared back from the call log. I didn't delete it or block him. I just flipped the phone face down. The day dragged on, machines beeping, nurses checking in, a food tray arriving and leaving untouched. I wasn't hungry, but I was alert, more awake than I'd been in years. When the nurse stopped by one last time before her shift ended, she gave me a warm smile. "Anything else I can help with?" she asked. I looked at her, a stranger who'd shown me more kindness than my own son. "No, thank you," I said softly. "You've already done plenty." And I meant every word. It wasn't loud or dramatic, no slammed doors, no big speeches, just a quiet shift. The hospital discharged me the day before, and a cab driver helped carry my small bag up my front steps. I thanked him, unlocked the door, and stepped into my house like a stranger. Everything was frozen in time. Shards of the broken bowl still scattered across the kitchen floor. A dried stain of soup pooled under the table. I stood there, staring, not in shock or grief, but in recognition. That mess was a mirror of my life. Years spent cleaning up after others, after him. He'd leave chaos, and I'd tidy it without a word, without thanks. Not anymore. I knelt down, slowly wiped the floor, and gathered each piece of the shattered bowl into a trash bag. Then I stood, straightened my shoulders, washed my hands, and set the kettle on. I opened my laptop, my hospital list beside me. Call lawyer, done. Stop automatic payments, underway. Close joint accounts, today. Remove the spare key from the porch, right now. It was a calm kind of rebellion, not driven by fury but by something solid, resolute. I was done giving pieces of myself to people who only noticed when I was gone. I logged into my banking app, and each click felt like shedding a weight. Fund paused. Rent payment cancelled. Emergency savings access cut off. His name disappeared from every account. I opened the drawer by the front door and found the spare key he used to let himself in without warning. His old house key, from a place they'd left 2 years ago, still dangled on the ring. He hadn't bothered to update it, just assumed my door would always be open. I slipped the key into a plastic bag, sealed it, and tucked it into an envelope labeled, "Return to sender." The mailman would take it later that day. I sat at the kitchen table, chamomile tea steaming in my cup, its warmth simple and comforting. The house's silence no longer felt oppressive, it felt clear, almost peaceful. Then came the knock. I didn't jump. I'd known it was coming. He was always a day too late. I rose, walked to the window, and parted the curtain just enough to see. There was James, clutching flowers, wearing that forced smile he saved for everyone but me. He knocked again. I cracked the door open, just wide enough to face him. "Mom," James said, his smile too wide, too forced. "I got here as fast as I could. Sarah threw a surprise dinner, and you know how those things go. I couldn't just walk out." I stayed silent. He kept talking, nervous now. "I brought your favorite, white lilies. I remembered you love them." I didn't reach for the flowers. He faltered, then said, "You look all right. Better than I expected. Why didn't you text me?" I almost let out a bitter laugh. He'd hung up while I was sprawled on the floor. He'd said, "Call 911. That's what they're for." And now he wanted a text. "I'm not seeing visitors today," I told him plainly. His eyes widened. "What?" "Mom, I drove all this way. I didn't ask you to come." Confusion flickered across his face, then irritation. "You're being so dramatic." That word, dramatic. He tossed it at me whenever I had needs. When I asked him to call more often, dramatic. When I needed help moving a shelf, dramatic. When I admitted Sarah's Thanksgiving jab hurt me, dramatic. "No," I said firmly. "I'm being honest." He took a step back. "So you're just shutting me out?" I nodded. "For now. Until I feel like I'm more than an inconvenience to you." His mouth opened, then closed, like he couldn't find words. "Is this about Sarah's birthday?" he finally asked. That's all he saw, a one-night mistake, a scheduling hiccup. Not the years of neglect, not the weight of it all. He thought this was about a single evening, but it was so much more. Then a memory hit me, one I'd buried deep. His 6th birthday. I'd almost missed it. I was juggling 2 jobs, his dad freshly gone, and I hadn't gotten a cake or wrapped his presents. Exhausted and guilty, I raced to a store during my only break, grabbed what I could afford, and made it home just in time. James ran to me, his little arms wrapping around my waist. "You came," he said, beaming. "I knew you would." He didn't care about the gifts or the rushed cake, just that I was there. I always showed up, even when I was barely holding it together. Now, all these years later, the tables had turned. He didn't show up. And that cut deeper than anything. I looked at him standing on my porch, the lilies wilting in his hand, his face unsure. I could have unleashed every hurt, every time he left me waiting. But I chose silence, not to hurt him, but to shield myself. He held out the flowers again. I didn't take them. He set them on the doormat and turned away. I shut the door, locked it, and went back to my tea. It tasted sweeter now. Later, I called the hospital nurse. I need to schedule a follow-up, I said. And please send the transportation voucher straight to me, no other contacts. She confirmed everything with a kind tone. Before we hung up, she asked, should we keep your son as your emergency contact? I paused, then said, no, take him off. A brief silence followed, then, got it. I ended the call. I walked to the living room shelf, where photos stood in a neat row, graduations, birthdays, Christmases. I picked up one frame, James at 6, frosting smeared on his cheeks, grinning, safe. I slid it into a drawer. Then another, James at 18, in his cap and gown, me beside him, beaming with pride. That one went in the drawer too. Not out of spite, but for clarity. I needed space from memories that didn't match the man who'd stood at my door. By nightfall, he texted, hope you're okay. Sarah thinks you need space, but I'm here when you're ready. Love you. I didn't respond. Love isn't a text you fire off when it suits you. It's showing up when someone's crumpled on the floor. He didn't. So I switched off my phone and let the silence sit with me. For once, it was enough. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the stillness after a storm, tense, heavy with echoes I didn't want to hear. 2 days had passed since I turned him away. He hadn't called again. I wasn't surprised. That's how James dealt with anything uncomfortable. He sidestepped it, let it settle like dust, assuming I'd sweep it up. I always had. On the third morning, the doorbell chimed, twice in quick succession. I stood in the hallway, my heart calm now. I didn't hurry or panic, just peered through the peephole. Sarah. I opened the door a crack. Hi, she said, forcing a smile. Can we talk? I didn't refuse, but I didn't budge either. She stepped closer anyway. This has gone too far, she said. James is a mess. A mess. I thought of lying alone in a hospital bed. Of dialing his number with trembling hands. Of his voice, bright and distracted, saying, I'll try next week. He feels terrible, she continued. He didn't realize how bad it was. I stayed silent. Look, she said, crossing her arms, her tone sharpening. Families have spats. You don't just cut people out over one mistake. One mistake. I remembered every favor I did, every bill I paid, every time I watched their kids so they could jet off on trips I couldn't afford. I remembered Sarah scoffing at the blanket I knitted for their baby, muttering to James, we'll get something more modern. He just nodded. I remembered cooking for them, only for her to say, we're not really into that home-cooked stuff anymore. I remembered James chuckling when I admitted I felt lonely. I remembered them inviting me to holidays but asking me to stay quiet so I wouldn't overwhelm her family. I remembered swallowing my words to keep the peace. Are you done? I asked. She blinked, startled. What? You came to defend him, not to hear me. I've done enough listening. She opened her mouth, but I gently closed the door, no force, just a soft click. The silence returned, but this time, it belonged to me. That afternoon, my phone started buzzing. First James, then Sarah, then James again. Voicemails piled up, apologies tangled with excuses, regret mixed with blame. Mom, this isn't fair. You're making this bigger than it is. I've always done my best. Sarah's upset now because of all this. Sarah's mom thinks you're acting erratic. She says this feels like emotional manipulation. She says maybe we need to set boundaries with you. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a long, furious voicemail from Sarah. You've humiliated James, she spat. He's been a wreck for days. We've always been there for you, and this is how you treat us. Her voice grew sharper, accusing me of playing the victim to punish them. You could have called me, but instead, you're making a spectacle, and now the neighbors are talking. She ended with, I don't care how sick you were, this isn't how family works. That's when I deleted her number from my phone. By the fourth day, their messages turned nastier, more cutting. If you keep acting like this, don't expect us to show up anymore. You're the one tearing this family apart. I can't believe you're throwing this fit over one dumb phone call. Their texts dripped with guilt trips. Dad would be ashamed of you. You've got Sarah crying every night. Do you want to end up alone? But not once did they say, I'm sorry I wasn't there. That was the apology I never got. On day 4, an email landed in my inbox, titled Urgent Family Matter. It was from James. He wrote that they couldn't fathom why I was acting this way, that I was causing trouble, upsetting their balance. He said Sarah was hurting, his coworkers noticed he was off, and he missed our old chats. If you don't stop this, I'm not sure we can keep trying with you, he wrote. I shut my laptop. He didn't miss me, he missed the me who fixed everything, who answered every call, who made his life easier. They didn't understand because they never bothered to ask. Then it hit me like a quiet thunderclap. This wasn't just a rough month. For years, I'd lived in a home where my worth was tied to what I gave, not who I was. I was the one they called when their fridge died, when their kids were sick, when their bank account ran dry. I was their safety net, their afterthought, their fallback. And when I needed them, truly needed them, I got a party in the background, laughter, and call 911. On the 5th day, I took a short walk around the block. The air was cool, the breeze soft against my face. My neighbor, Mrs. Harper, was tending her garden, watering her roses. She waved, and I waved back. She strolled over, her gloves dusted with soil, and smiled warmly. How are you holding up? I heard about the hospital. I nodded. Getting better. She touched my arm gently. You're one of the kindest folks around here, everyone says so. I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, thanks. Then she added, some people don't deserve your devotion. It's okay to let them go. Her words sank deep. I'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to give me permission to stop carrying people who wouldn't carry me back. But I realized I didn't need it anymore. When I got home, I played one last voicemail from James. His voice was low, weary, but still dodging. I miss you, Mom. But if you keep pushing us away, I don't know what more I can do. Always about what he could do, never about what he should have done. I deleted it, then cleared out the rest. I sat in my living room, cradling a warm mug of tea, and took a deep breath. It wasn't about the fight being over, it was about letting go of the hope that things would change. In that big, quiet house, I wasn't alone anymore. I was free. And then, out of nowhere, I smiled. The first thing I did was call a locksmith. Not out of anger or fear, but because I finally understood I didn't want anyone walking into my home unless they valued what it meant to me. For too long, I'd let people come and go as they pleased, treating my space like it was theirs to use whenever it suited them. They didn't knock or ask, they just assumed. And I'd let them. Until now. The locksmith was kind, didn't pry. As he installed the new bolts, I gathered up the spare keys I'd handed out over the years to make their lives easier. I dumped them all into a plastic bag and tossed it in the trash. That afternoon, a letter appeared in my mailbox, not handwritten, but typed, cold, and formal. It was from Sarah, probably meant to seem reasonable, but it was anything but. We're deeply disappointed in your behavior, it read. Our children need to learn compassion and forgiveness, and your actions are sending the wrong message. James is hurting. We hope you'll reflect and reconsider. Not a single word about how I was feeling. No apology. Just blame dressed up in polite words. Then the text started again, some from blocked numbers, others from names I didn't know. James says you're still ignoring him. This is your granddaughter's godmother. You're breaking this family apart. They wanted me to feel guilty, to drag me back into their cycle. For a moment, I wondered if I was being too harsh, if I was punishing them too much. But then I remembered their laughter over the phone while I lay on the floor. I remembered every excuse, every justification for choosing their comfort over my crisis. I remembered calling James's name and hearing, "Can I call you next week?" That wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. A week after changing the locks, a nurse from the hospital called. "I just spoke with James," she said gently. "He asked about your follow-up schedule." I took a slow breath. "He's not authorized to access my medical information anymore. Please update my file." A pause, then, understood. "Would you like to list someone else?" "Yes," I said. "Just me." I was finally my own emergency contact. That night, I stood in the doorway of the spare room, the one I always kept ready in case James and Sarah dropped by, the one with fresh linens and extra pillows for their unexpected visits. I stared at it, then opened the window, letting the breeze sweep in. The curtains danced, free after years of stillness. The next morning, I packed away everything that didn't feel like mine, old photos, trinkets, baby books they never bothered to claim. I labeled the box and stored it in the garage. I didn't toss it out, but I didn't keep it close either. I filled the room with things that were mine, books I'd been meaning to read, a small potted plant I'd always wanted, a painting I'd hidden because Sarah said it didn't match their taste. I hung a scarf I'd knitted years ago that James never picked up. I tacked up a little card from a neighbor's daughter that read, "Thank you for helping my mom." I turned that guest room into a writing space, a quiet corner just for me. I started jotting down lists, thoughts, even stories, not for anyone else, but for myself. For the first time in years, my home felt like it matched the space I was carving out in my own life. About a month after the dust had settled, a card arrived in my mailbox, no sender's address, no signature inside. It said, "I saw you in the hospital that night, alone in the waiting area. I was sitting across from you, unsure what to say, but I knew your face. You were the woman who helped me when my mom was ill, bringing her a blanket and telling me I wasn't on my own. You made a difference to a stranger, and I wanted you to know." I read those words twice, then folded the card and slipped it into my bedside drawer. There was no one to write back to, no way to respond, just a quiet truth. Sometimes, the people we give our hearts to don't truly see us. But that doesn't mean we're invisible. It just means we poured ourselves into the wrong hands. 2 months later, I got the last message James would ever send me. It was brief, "I don't recognize you anymore." I read it once and smiled, because for the first time, I recognized myself. I was someone who understood her own value, who stopped pleading for love that wasn't returned, who no longer waited for others to show up. That evening, I settled into my chair by the window, a mug of tea in hand, the sound of rain tapping softly outside. My house didn't feel hollow anymore. It was filled with things that mattered: calm, space, light, and me. Just me, and that was plenty. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in, you're not alone. You don't have to earn love or prove your worth. And when someone demands too much of you, it's okay to step away. I'm done hiding the truth, even if it stings.